Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Now, we left off last time I was on here with David at 1 Samuel 25 when David meets, Abigail, his wife, and, that whole thing. If you want to know more about that story, I refer you to episode 29. And now we are back to the point where David is once again on the run. He seems to be on the run a lot, particularly from King Saul. Now, some important context I feel the need to remind everybody is that Saul has issues, like with either his mental health or with actual demon possession. Now, in the Bible, it was very clear, as I've discussed in previous episodes, that these demons are being unleashed by God, aka Yahweh, who is supposed to be the God of the Old Testament. He is the one who keeps unleashing these demons on Saul, and every time he seems to be possessed by these demons, he gets it in his head he wants to kill David. Even though, allegedly, David is supposed to be the next anointed king or something. It's a mess. It's a mess. I think it's Yahweh wanting David dead, but trying to hide his hands. That's my opinion. I'm allowed to have it. But let's continue where we left off. Okay. David, as he is many times, on the run, and a Ziphite, or a group of Ziphites, rather, go to Saul and warn him where David is hiding. And then once again, Saul goes and tries to hunt David down. Now, David, here we are in chapter 1 Samuel 26. I will begin with verse 3. Saul made his camp beside the road on the hill of Hachilah, facing Jeshimon, but David stayed in the wilderness. When he saw that Saul had followed him there, he sent out scouts and learned that Saul was definitely there. Then David sent out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and the commander of the army were laying down. Saul was lying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. Then David asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Abishai, son of Zeruiah, "Who will go down into the camp with me to Saul?" "I'll go with you," said Abishai. So David and Abishai went to the army by night, and there was Saul, lying asleep inside the camp with his spear stuck in the ground near his head, and Abner and the soldiers were all lying around him. And then Abishai said to David, "Today God has delivered your enemy into your hands. Now let me pin him to the ground with one thrust of the spear. I won't strike him twice." But David said to Abishai, "Don't destroy him. Who can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed and be guiltless? As surely as the Lord lives," he said, "the Lord himself will strike him, or his time will come, and he will die, or he will go into battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Now, get the spear and water jug that are near his head, and let's go." See, if you remember from previous episodes, this whole scenario kind of went out before. He has a chance to kill Saul while Saul is vulnerable and sleeping, and instead he just takes a belonging of his just to prove that he had a chance to kill Saul, but he didn't, hoping that will dissuade Saul from continuing his pursuit of David. Now remember, he had to sneak through the entire army just to get to Saul, and it says right here in verse 12, no one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone wake up. They were all sleeping because the Lord had put them into a deep sleep. So Yahweh is just roaming free, ignoring all these prime directives that are supposed to be in place for beings in a higher evolutionary status with higher technology. Just ignoring all these rules now. He's drugging them. He puts them to sleep. He brings them to the wilderness. He drops bread from the sky. He drops rocks from the sky, fireballs from the sky. I mean, Yahweh's just doing the absolute most all the time with these people. And this has just been going on and on after generation after generation after generation at this point. We are well beyond the days of Moses, and he is still messing with these people. Just putting them all into this deep sleep. Anyhow, let's get back to the story. And anyways, David, later, confronts Saul, after, he's clear from the army and everything, and he's safe. Here, let me find the specific verse. Okay. Verse 17. Saul recognized David's voice and said, "Is that your voice, David, my son?" And David replied, "Yes, it is, my lord the king." And he added, "Why is my lord pursuing his servant? What have I done, and what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my lord the king listen to his servant's words. If the Lord has incited you against me, then may he accept an offering. If, however, people have done it, may they be cursed before the Lord. They have driven me today from my share in the Lord's inheritance, and have said, 'Go serve other gods.' Now do not let my blood fall to the ground far from the presence of the Lord. The king of Israel has come out to look for a flea, as one hunts a partridge in the mountains." Then Saul said, "I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you have considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I have acted like a fool, and I've been terribly wrong." So, like I said, this has happened like one too many times, and David goes on his own way. I mean, they basically like make their peace for the moment at least, and they both go about their own way. Saul promises not to try to kill David again for the third or fourth time. But anyways, David, forgives him, goes on his way. But he obviously, with good reason, doesn't necessarily trust Saul. I mean, Saul has just gone too far. He's just tried to kill him one too many times and asked for forgiveness afterwards. So now we're in chapter 27 in verse 1. David thought to himself, "One of these days I will be destroyed by the hand of Saul. The best thing I can do is escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will give up searching for me anywhere in Israel, and I will slip out of his hand." So David and his 600 men, remember, David's got his own army of loyal followers at this point. It's about 600 of them. They're 600 strong. And they went over to the king of Gath, Ashish, son of Maok, king of Gath. These are the Philistines. And David is basically going to join with the Philistines. And then when Saul learned of this, he stopped searching for him. I think because once he realized that he was out of Israel territory, he didn't feel quite as threatened about David taking over his kingdom, probably. Once he thought, well, he's in with the Philistine, our enemy, so he's probably no threat to me anymore. That's what I'm assuming. Now, David approached the king, and he said, "Why should a servant such as myself live in a royal city with you?" He came to the king kind of humbling himself. I don't deserve to be amongst the royalty or whatnot. So basically an excuse just so David could get his own little territory. And so he did. So Ashish gives him Ziklag. And according to verse 6, ever since this day, Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah ever since. Because, we get into, after this period, we get into the period, the kings and stuff. David, of course, David hasn't, quite made it to the throne yet. It's just kind of giving, foreshadowing the future, if you will. Okay, and according to verse 7, David lived in Philistine territory 1 year and 4 months. And I want to just marvel at this for a second, because, remember, the Philistines, we've always been told, are there were these evil, monstrous people who were doing all these evil, terrible things. And here's David making peace with them, living amongst them. I just think it's, I don't know. I'm starting to develop this feeling. And remember, this is just a feeling. I'm allowed to speculate about things. I mean, I have no way to prove this or know any more than anyone else does. But why do I get this nagging feeling that all of this has been worded in such a way? How do I explain this? How do I properly put this? It almost seems to me that Yahweh doesn't really like David. You know what I mean? I know that we're meant to believe that he's supposed to be the next chosen king, specifically by Yahweh, but I'm not so sure about that. Because it's just conflicting. It's conflicting. Okay? Why is he always constantly on Saul's ass with these demons? that drive him so crazy to the point where he's always trying to kill David. But yet, David's supposed to be the next anointed. Like, it's almost as if Yahweh does not want Saul and David to get along. Even though Saul loves David and David loves Saul, and even though Yahweh has anointed them both as kings, allegedly, Saul the first king, and once he's gone, David's going to be the next king, he's still always trying to cause problem between these two. And I just find that interesting. That's just me. I just find it conflicting. It's like Yahweh always wants some trouble. Like, he can't just let people get along and serve him. No, he's got to start trouble all the time. But nonetheless, let's continue with this story, because it gets a little dark for David. You see, even though David has all this loyalty to King Saul and everything, does not mean he was necessarily like a good person. Because in the year or so that David lived amongst the Philistines, he would do raids of other areas, neighboring places, like the Amalekites, the Jeshurites, all these people. And it says specifically in verse 9, 1 Samuel 27, verse 9, whenever David attacked an area, he did not leave a man or woman alive, but took sheep and cattle, donkeys, camels, clothes, and he would return to Ashish in Gath. He was basically plundering and raiding, killing everybody, killing all the living people, taking all the plunder. He, you know what I mean? Like, he's a murderer. I mean, David's a murderer. I mean, he's just a murderer. Just because he's murdering for Yahweh doesn't make it any more noble, but, like, you know what I mean? He's killing innocent people. And this time, he's not even doing it for the Israelites. He's doing it for the Philistines. Now, it does say that the reason he didn't leave anyone alive is because he didn't really basically want people to tell on him what he's doing. So it's confusing. I don't know if David's acting like as a spy in Philistine territory or what. But either way, he has everyone fooled, because Ashish ends up trusting David so much that he thinks that, like, he's loyal to the Philistines and not the Israelites anymore. I'm a little unsure where David's loyalties lie at this point. But we will learn later. I mean, they do at least eventually, he does end up becoming loyal to Israel again in the future. We know this because he ends up becoming like a king. But, like, as of right now, he's doing this in the name of the Philistines, I guess. So, anywho, okay. Now we get to chapter 28. David, being part of the Philistines, gets to a point where he's going to have to end up fighting against Israel. Because, remember, the Philistines are still enemies with Israel. Okay, and here we are, chapter 28, verse 1. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces to fight against Israel. Ashish said to David, "You must understand that you and your men will accompany me in the army." And David said, "Then you will see for yourself what your servant can do." And Ashish replied, "Very well. I will make you my bodyguard for life." Now, we leave David for a minute in verse 3, and we skip over to Saul and what Saul's got going on. Now, keeping in mind that Samuel the prophet is dead and has been dead for a while, he was buried in his town in Ramah. Here, let me just read the verse. Okay, verse 3. Now Samuel was dead, and all Israel had mourned for him, and buried him in his own town of Ramah. Saul had expelled the mediums and spiritists from the land. Yes, that's right. And then the Philistines assembled and came and set up camp at Shunem, while Saul gathered all of Israel and set up camp in Gilboa. Now, when Saul saw the Philistine army, he became afraid, and he inquired of the Lord, but the Lord did not answer him by dreams or Urim or prophets. And since he had expelled all the spiritists and mediums from the land, he was in a pickle. He had to get one of his servants to go find him a woman who is a medium, so I may go and inquire of her. Now, I find that very interesting, because remember, Samuel was a prophet, which is just another word for a seer or a shaman or whatever. I just find it interesting why Saul specifically requested a woman, because there were men who did this too. I find that interesting. I don't have an answer. I was just curious. I find that interesting. But anyway, so Saul breaking his own rule, he wants a medium or a spiritist to let him know, like, what's going to happen. You know what I mean? He's being surrounded by Philistines, and he's scared. So he gets a medium. Now, in verse 8, I'm going to read here in verse 8 a little bit. So Saul disguised himself, putting on other clothes, and at night he and 2 men went to the woman. "Consult a spirit for me," he said, "and bring up for me the one I name." But the woman said to him, "Surely you know what Saul has done." Because remember, she doesn't know that this is Saul. "Surely you must know what Saul has done. He has cut off the mediums and spiritists from the land. Why have you set a trap for my life to bring about my death?" And Saul swore to her by the Lord, "As surely as the Lord lives, you will not be punished for this." So then the woman asked, "Okay, whom shall I bring up for you?" And he told her Samuel. So when the woman saw Samuel, she realized that he actually was Saul, and she became frightened and yelled at him and asked, why'd you lie to me, bro? You, like, what? And he was like, no, don't be afraid, just tell me what you see. And she explains that she sees a ghost, and this ghost ends up looking like Samuel, at least according to the verses, says it looks like Samuel, that the old man wearing a robe is coming up, and Saul just knew it was Samuel somehow. And he bowed down and prostrated himself with his face on the ground. Samuel, however, was not happy. Verse 15, Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" "I am in great distress," Saul said. "The Philistines are fighting against me, and God has departed from me. He no longer answers me, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have called on you to tell me what to do." And Samuel said, "Why do you consult me, now that the Lord has departed from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done what he predicted through me. The Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hands and given it to one of your neighbors, to David, because you didn't obey the Lord or carry out his fierce wrath against the Amalekites." Remember? From previous videos, we talked about this. You see, Saul, the whole beef that God, aka Yahweh, has with Saul is because when he went to slaughter the Amalekites, the Amalekites, Saul didn't kill everything. He left some, and he brought some of the animals back, and he brought like one of their kings back. He still ended up killing the king anyway, but still. He didn't follow the instructions to the T and kill everything that was breathing. That's what Yahweh wanted. And Yahweh has had a problem with Saul ever since. Because Saul didn't fully, completely genocide an entire group of people. That's Yahweh's beef. And so now he clearly says that, and because of this, I'm going to take it all from you and give it to David. At least that's what we're led to believe. I'm starting to have a feeling that, I don't know, we're missing important context because something just doesn't click right with what's being described in the scripture. Just something's not clocking. Like I said, I've already explained that. But anyway, so, all that happens, and Saul is just, on the ground, distraught, not eating, not drinking, and then the woman, the medium, fed him and everything and took care of him and his men, and then, once he got fed and everything, she sent him on his way, showed him some kindness. I can't help but feel a little bit bad for Saul. You know what I mean? He's tormented by these demons, never asked to be king to begin with, never asked for any of this. I don't know, I just can't help but feel bad for the guy. But anyways, so the Philistines are all gathered up, they're ready to fight Israel, and this and that and the other. But some of the men weren't very happy with Ashish's buddy David. They didn't like the fact that he was Hebrew, and they felt like he may have divided loyalties. And who can blame them for feeling that way? I mean, they're about to fight David's the group of people that David's supposed to be from. I mean, there's songs about David, legends about David, how Saul has slain thousands and David tens of thousands. So the men and the commanders didn't trust David like Ashish trusted David. And so Ashish explained this to David, man, I'm sorry. I trust you. I know you've got my back, but the guys here, they don't really trust an Israelite. They don't want you to go into battle with us. So then David and his men head back to Ziklag. Now, and then a whole lot of drama starts unfolding simultaneously in both places. David goes back home to Ziklag while the Philistines have surrounded the Israelites. David and his men go back to Ziklag, only to find out and discover that Ziklag had been raided by the Amalekites. Yes, the same group of Amalekites. And they had raided Ziklag and kidnapped the women, including David's wives. So David gets the priest, Abiathar, and consults him, wants him to consult the Lord, asks if he should go after this raiding party or not. And word comes back that yes, he should and that he'll succeed. So David and his 600 cronies, they go and they hunt down the Amalekites that had kidnapped all the women. Now David does end up catching up. Oh shoot, wait, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself. David and the other okay, sorry. When they pursue these people, they stumble upon an Egyptian in the field, and and I guess he was starving and thirsty, and they gave him food and drink, and then David asked him, "Who do you belong to? Where do you come from?" And he said, "I am an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite. My master abandoned me when I became ill 3 days ago. We raided the Negev of the Kerethites, some territory belonging to Judah, and the Negev of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag." And David asked him, "Can you lead me down to this raiding party?" And he answered, "Swear to me before God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down them." And then, so he led David down, and they were all eating and drinking, I guess, prematurely celebrating everything. And then David fought them, killed all of them, except for 400. 400 of them managed to escape, but David did recover the women, including his wives. So, I mean, I guess it was mostly good. Yeah, I guess it was mostly good. There was some of David's men who didn't go, and the men who did go felt kind of bitter about sharing the spoils, but David, trying to make David look like a good person at this point. He's like, no, we're going to share everything with everybody. We're all equal. We will all share alike. And David made this as a rule for Israel, a lasting rule for Israel from that day forward. So, anyways, getting back to now, we flip back over to Israel and the Philistines who had left without David, who are fighting against Israel. We get back to them. Unfortunately, for Saul and his children, it didn't go down good. Saul and all of his children got killed. Most of his children, including his sons, Jonathan. Yes, that Jonathan, David's lover Jonathan. Yes, they were all killed by the Philistines. And so, yeah. And yes, this was the same battle where Saul and Jonathan and them died. It was the same battle David was going to fight in, but because of the Philistines' mistrust for David, he didn't. And all of this kind of happened simultaneously. Like, David goes back to Ziklag. That had been raided. He goes and hunts down the Amalekites who did that and gets his wife back. All while that's happening, the Israelites are overtaken by the Philistines. So it was a lot all happening at once here at the end of 1 Samuel. And that is how 1 Samuel ends, with the death of Saul and Jonathan. And when we come back to 2 Samuel, we will get more into that and David's reaction and all this, because I'm starting to develop, and remember, this is just my own speculation, I'm starting to develop this theory that when the story was originally written, I'm starting to think David wasn't like the good, valiant guy. And I could be wrong, but it just really seems like Yahweh does not like David. I mean, like, because if he did, and like, because like it could have gone smoothly. Like, David and Saul could have been loyal to each other. David could have been his loyal servant all the way up until the time when Saul dies and David could take over the kingdom. That could have all went smoothly for them. But like, Yahweh keeps releasing these unrelenting demons onto Saul, all because Saul didn't fully and completely carry out a genocide. And I had this other theory that, let's say if Saul or the Israelites were successful in killing all the Amalekites, all the Philistines, all their enemies, pretty much like every race in the Middle East but the Israelites, if they were actually successful, I'm of the opinion that they all would have been next. I mean, Yahweh has no problem dropping fireballs from the sky and stuff, and like putting them to sleep, withholding food, withholding water. He has no problem doing none of that. So like, it just seems to me like he wouldn't have a problem killing them once they were done doing his dirty work for him. I mean, I don't know. Yahweh doesn't seem to have like morals or decency like David or Saul had. You know what I mean? Like, he basically, remember back when Samuel first found out that Yahweh overnight decides he hates Saul, Samuel was crying and mourning over Saul. And Yahweh was basically, what are you crying for? What are you crying for? Emotional humans. You know what I mean? Like, so he's not like, he doesn't have that much decency. I guess that's all I really wanted to say. And this is the same entity that the Israelites, or the Jewish faith, the Jewish faith worships. That's who they worship. And I don't know, it's becoming, especially with events unfolding like today, I don't know, it's just becoming more and more clear that we really need to wake up from this religious spell, this entrapmental slavery that religion causes, and so we can actually grow spiritually, because nothing kills spirituality more than religion does. That's my opinion. Anyways, I don't know, what do y'all think? I will be back as soon as I can, in a couple days hopefully, and we will begin 2 Samuel. So anyways, I hope you all have a good day.